Welcome back to the channel. On this video, let's explore again in terms of business development for bringing a project into life. Let's take a look at a situation in a pull mode. Just to recap, a pull mode is meaning you're responding to a demand by someone who look at you to develop a project for them so they can reach an audience, contrary to the push mode where you are of a project and you try to push it to an audience and get it funded and getting produced. Okay, so on this one we're going to take a look what are the steps that we have to go through in a pull mode. Let's get started. Okay, so again, let's use a roadmap principle for what are the steps if I am in a pull mode. Okay, so for example, who is responding to a project coming from a customer typically? Okay, in the live show business, for example, there's a lot of customer. For example, Las Vegas, big theater, resorts, entertainment. They need a show. Okay, so they will issue a demand to different vendors. Please develop us a show for our theater. Okay, it might be also a distributor that might say, hey, in a movie business, we're looking for a movie about this topic or a documentary about this topic. Okay, and they're looking for people to develop for them something that will be used by them. Okay, so that's a pull. Okay, we're reacting to somebody asking us for doing something for them. Example, VFX is a pull mode. Okay, VFX will respond to the demand by a studio to produce a bid that will tell them this is what we see that we could do in order for you to be able to the visual that we're going to do for you with these scenes that you have, and this is what it's going to look like. Okay, so a lot of the business works in pull mode, but here for the example, I'm going to use an example of a live show where you will have a request for proposal for the creation and an implementation of a concept that they might have. So let me move aside a little bit and get more space for the map. So here the situation is I am a company that creates shows and could operate shows too and develop shows. So I'm receiving an RFP, a request for proposal, which is a document that is issued by the buyer. In this case, it could be like, for example, a big casino in Las Vegas that issue that, or it could be also especially coming from China, big vendors that developing real estate and they have a theaters and they're looking for a show, for example, to put in their theater. Or it could be an event and they need you to develop a concept for that. So typically we'll start with a creative brief where the customer will say, this is what we would like to have. We would like something about this team. It will not start just, we just want to show. Okay, usually we'll say, we want to show the team of our, let's say it's a casino in Vegas. Usually the whole resort hotel with the casinos got a team. And they will say, we want a show related to this team, etc. So they will give you a creative brief. And with that, there will be a request for proposal that will dictate what they expect. Okay, in the request for proposal, they might ask about the creative. They might mention also about, do they need specific assets in terms of infrastructure, or they're going to provide the infrastructure, just work with what we have. They provide the constraint that they have in terms of space, in terms of time, etc. So the request for proposal usually will be a pretty thick document that will come. Coming out of that, you will have, to develop a concept versus what they are asking you. Okay? Very rare they will put the concept there. They will use the creative, what they're expecting, the team, etc. But the concept, they will leave it to you to develop that concept. Now, you will put together that concept. For sometimes we charge for the concept, depending of, again, the supply and demand. If, for example, you're asking for a concept that's, to develop the concept, it will take a lot of resource, will take a lot of time, will cost a lot of money. You might have a contract just after the concept to say, okay, now if you want us to bid on this one, you want a concept before we start working on the full bid, we're gonna actually charge you for this, okay? And it could be called a concept development agreement. There's different ways that you could call it, but you will develop the concept, okay? And you will put also the story behind the concept. What was what did you use as your source for the creation, okay? How did you get inspired? Also, what kind of the characters that you have in your stories, what's behind them, right? Where do they go? What do they do? You will also think about everything else that goes with this story in terms of scenery, in terms of props, so anything that document with that goes with that story that makes that story more appealing. That will be what we call the story behind the story. And then you're going to put together the bid of versus that one, which is going to be covering pretty much how much is going to cost to develop this show, how long it's going to take, what are the and you're going to break down in terms of the type of resource you're going to need to bring in, what it is expected on the other side. So what does the customer needs to provide, or as we assume they're providing, what is it that we are going to be doing? All of this will cover the time, cost, quality, the people, the resource, the risk, and everything. So the bid is a pretty big document that you need to prepare, especially if it's a big request for proposal. And with that, you're going to move into what we call vendor selection and contract negotiation. Obviously, certain vendors will be eliminated immediately. You might have a process of having many vendors and then shortlist some of them and then negotiate with some of them. You might have only a couple of vendors, 3 vendors, because the type of things we do is only 2 or 3 that could do it. And therefore, we're going to move immediately into starting negotiation. We might have a decision made based on the bid, and then we negotiate only with the one that we decided. And if it doesn't work, we move to the next one. So on this one, it'll be left to the buyer to decide how they're going to tackle their process, okay? For some of them, it's better to have everybody at the same time, but it's a lot of work to negotiate. Let's say you got 3 and you negotiate with the 3 in parallel. There's danger also of IP violation by saying, oh, we saw something on this bid, we like it, can you do this here? You got to be careful, okay? People will be bidding their intellectual property, their trade secret, their vendors that they have developed. If they have any patent or they're thinking about a certain patent to do certain things, it'll be there. So you have to make sure that this is protected when you're going to be bidding and you're going to be looking at the buyer. Can we trust them? Are you going to protect our intellectual property? Okay, we're going to put some IDs there. I don't want to see my ID on another bid because they're cheaper. Okay, so again, you got to be careful when you bid. Okay, we know certain country, they do not protect intellectual property. They feel that if you have provided them in the bid, that's it. It's there. Okay, it's them now. Okay, and especially if they paid for you to bid, then yeah, they own it. You got to be careful. They're not owning it. You still own it, and they will own it, and you're going to have to decide, is this a contract where I retain the intellectual property and you pretty much own the rights to use it, versus no, we're transferring completely the intellectual property. So there's going to be a lot of discussion that needs to be taught when you're going to be developing that contract, because whatever you agree to, if you agree that they own it and they can do whatever they want with it, then yeah, you have no more recourse to actually stop or prevent your IDs to be taken by somebody else that they decide to say you're going to do this, etc. So again, you got to be careful. You got to work with your lawyer when you're going to do your bid to make sure the clause are there of what we're bidding to you. Okay, so for example, in certain case, we bid a show and we give them 2 months to decide. Okay, basically that concept cannot be used anywhere else, cannot be bid to anybody else, and they have the rights on this one for two months to decide if they want to use it or not. After 2 months, if they haven't decided, we're taking back all the rights and we could bid it to somebody else because they didn't use it. Okay, so that could be something we do. Sometimes the buyer doesn't want that. They will say, we'll pay, we'll pay you that. And if I don't take it, I don't want to see it on my neighbor. So there's no written rules there. Okay, you're going to have to play the games with your lawyer. That's why you got to be very careful with these contracts after you bid something. And then you move into contract sign off. And of course, in the negotiation of your contract, you got to be careful on your cash flow. Okay, on a creation of a show that could cost many millions of dollars, if you don't have much cash in your bank, you have to make sure that, as part of the signature of the contract, there's an amount coming in, and then per milestones, you will have an invoice and you will collect cash so you don't run out of cash in the middle of the project. Because if you don't do that, you're going to end up in a month where you have no more money in the bank, cannot pay your employee, cannot pay your vendors, and then the whole problems start there because now your delays are coming in and the whole shebang is going in, right? So that would be a roadmap in a pull mode, for example, of a show. Okay, it's similar on a VFX, for example, where the customer will send the script instead of the creative bid and say, here's our script. Please let us know what do you see, and you will, with a request for proposal and pretty much describe what they expect the vendor to be able to do, what scenes they would like them to tackle that. But sometimes they give a lot of room to maneuver to the VFX production company to decide, pick the scene you think you could do, tell us what you're going to do. And of course, there's a lot of work for them to put storyboards and showing, how they visualize what they would do that scene. Sometimes they start with a one line, right? Mark said this at this time, and then they have to put it into a visual piece there. And so there's a lot of creative that needs to be go. Then they will bid it, and then they will be moving into vendor selection. Okay, so the pull mode, some business works in the pull mode. Okay, you got to be careful. Okay, what you're bidding, and basically what is going to go in the contract, especially if you develop the intellectual property. If you're not developing the intellectual property, well, then it's can make it easier. For example, a VFX, the movie doesn't, you don't own them. You're just providing a service of doing the special effect and the visual effect. However, if you're bidding a show and you develop that, and you develop the music, and you develop the costume, and you develop all of this, people will expect to get royalties. So again, you're going to have to be very careful in terms of your contract that you're going to be negotiating in this case.